and gentlemen, the meeting will come to order. My name is Bob Hiss, and I'm proud to be your town moderator. Welcome to town meeting. Tonight, as is obvious, since you are all here virtually, we'll be conducting another town meeting with our recent approach as a virtual town meeting. My approach will be to conduct the introductory portion as we always do, starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Then I'll read a motion to conduct this meeting as a remote town meeting as required by the legislation that enables representative town meetings to do so. The motion modifies some of our rules, and I'll explain when finished the reasons. We'll then answer any questions and vote on the motion. If the motion passes, the meeting will continue. If the motion fails, I'll adjourn the meeting and we will reconvene at some future time and place. So off we go. So I'll start with, in keeping with our tradition, we'll start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, I'm going to read this motion to conduct a remote town meeting. And when I'm done, if someone wishes to say so moved in the Q&A, and then if someone would second when I'm done in the Q&A, we can proceed. Moved that the town of Milton conduct its 2022 special spring town meeting as a remote town meeting using the Zoom webinar technology as recommended by the town moderator and approved by the select board on Wednesday, February 15, 2022. Further, during the 2022 special spring remote town meeting, only the following rules will be modified to conform with the limitations of the Zoom webinar technology. Rule 1 is replaced in its entirety by the following. First, town meeting members are required to register for town meeting with the town clerk and join town meeting via a computing device by clicking on the town meeting link emailed to them in advance. The town clerk will confirm their registration as they are admitted to the remote town meeting. Town citizens and others who are not town meeting members will only be permitted to the remote town meeting with the prior permission of the moderator. Rule 2 is modified as follows. Second, any town meeting member wishing to speak to any article or pending related matter will first click the raise hand button, and upon being recognized by the moderator, will identify himself by giving his or her name and precinct. If you have not been recognized by the moderator, you are not permitted to speak to the meeting. On occasion, members will informally alert the moderator that they desire to be recognized to speak on a certain article. While your moderator will attempt to remember who desires to be recognized on any article, please be advised that the only way in which a member can be sure to be recognized is to click the raise hand button and wait to be recognized. Lastly, Rule 11 is modified as follows. 11th, upon a question being put to the town meeting, the moderator will first determine by electronic vote the sense of the meeting. The moderator will display and announce the results of the electronic vote. If the vote is doubted by 25 town meeting members clicking the raise hand button, then there will be a roll call of the meeting with the town clerk calling the name of each town meeting member in alphabetical order, and each town meeting member, upon his or her name being called, shall unmute their microphone and answer yes or no. With that, I'll look at the Q&A and see if we have a motion to adopt. Mr. Zachler-Lopmar so moves. Mr. James Quinn seconds. With that, does anyone wish to speak to this motion to conduct the remote town meeting? If so, please click the raise hand button. Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. If we can put up the poll. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain or just decline to vote. Okay, we can close the poll and present the results. The motion carries with 100% favorable. Thank you very much. Yes, so I'm going to go through at the end. Madam Clerk reminds me of a few Zoom techniques I'll remind everyone about. which we will do as we get to that portion. So, having advised by the town clerk that a majority of town meeting members are in attendance, I hereby declare that a quorum is present for the transaction of business. I'd like to remind the body that we are still operating under our town meeting rules as adopted in our May 2021 annual town meeting, as modified by the most recent remote town meeting motion. Before proceeding with the business of the meeting, however, there are certain preliminary matters to be taken up. First, permission has been requested for certain members. Maybe I'll just pause for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to double check a little video issue we might be having. So I've been accused of being unclear, but I've never been blurry before. This is a first, but thank you, our crack team here, for solving that problem. Before proceeding with the business of the meeting, however, there are certain preliminary matters to be taken up. First, permission has been granted for certain members and personnel of the planning board and other boards, committees, and departments who are not town meeting members to attend with other members of their respective boards, committees, and departments, upon the understanding, of course, that they will not vote. Hearing no objection in the Q&A from the body, such permission will be and hereby is accorded. Second, permission is granted to Milton Cablevision to televise these proceedings. Also, please note that there are microphones, of course, on each of your computing devices, and we'll recognize each of you as you click the raise hand button to speak. I'm hearing that the video quality degraded again, according to the chat.
No, that was during that.
That was during, so we're clear, okay? Very good. Hearing no objection in the chat room, those will be the procedural rules for the meeting. Certain matters coming before the town meeting require a 2/3 vote. This year, we'll have several articles that will require a 2/3 vote. I'll inform you of those before we vote on those motions. We'll begin with some introductory remarks. I'm sad to announce that we've lost some town employees, some elected officials, and friends since our last meeting. There are a few announcements after which I'll ask for a moment of silence. So first, Mr. John Cronin. He was a executive secretary. You might think of that as the town administrator role from 1968 to 2001, which is 33 years. He was a town meeting member for 25 years, from 62 to 68 and 2003 to 22. He was the park commissioner from 61 to 68, the conservation commissioner from 62 to 67, the town government study committee from 2012 to 2019. A wonderful member of our town and a dedicated public servant. Ms. Catherine Hayes Dunphy served on the select board, I believe, as the first woman elected to the select board, served between 1993 and 99 for 6 years, served on the warrant committee for 4 years from 84 to 88, and a town meeting member for 34 years between 82 and 2016. And her husband, Mr. James Dunphy, who apparently passed away within a month of Ms. Dunphy, served on the warrant committee for 2 years from 2000 to 2002, and was a town meeting member for 36 years from 1980 to 2016. In addition, we also lost Frank Agostino, a member of the Fire Station Building Committee, and Ms. Ella Wells, who was a town meeting member in these last few months. I'd like to ask the members to join me in a moment of silence for these departed friends and for the people of Ukraine suffering and dying at the hands of an evil Russian dictatorship. Thank you for that. Now, I've been asked by Brian Walsh, who was the chair of the Fire Station Building Committee, if he could have a few moments to give us an update. The COVID supply chain problems have affected his committee's plan, and he's going to tell us how they are adapting. So, Mr. Walsh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Oh, my video had started. Very good.
Now
Thank
we
you,
see you.
Moderator. Brian Walsh, Town Meeting Member from Precinct 8 and Chair of your Fire Station Building Committee. I want to thank Town Meeting for the continued support of our efforts. And on behalf of the Fire Station Building Committee, we have a quick but a very important update we want to provide. First, the Select Board on our behalf completed the purchase of the property at St. Agatha's, which will be used as the location for our new East Milton Fire Station. This is a terrific location that will provide faster response time to 75% of their district. I'd like to thank the pastor, Father Pilati, in the parish of St. Agatha's for accommodating this. Second, we had explained all along in this project that it was our intent to put all 3 fire stations out to bid at one time. The thinking, sound thinking at the time, was that we believe we get the best pricing for anyone responding because it has such a much larger project. COVID has changed this. I think as most of you likely know, material costs have risen significantly, especially considering that we could be up to 6 years completing all 3 stations. A strong advice of both our OPM, Owner's Project Manager, and the design team, we are putting out to bid only the headquarters station. Then we'll reevaluate. By the way, that we'll put it out to bid. It will take approximately 2 years to then build it. And we'll then reevaluate whether we should bid one or both of the remaining stations, Atherton and the East Milton station. I have with me Brian Fuller's Vertex company. They are our owner's project manager. He can quickly explain better than me what we learned about pricing and provide, which made us take this change and provide the current status on behalf of the bidding of the headquarters project. So with your permission, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Fuller's.
Thank you, sir. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you very much, everybody, for having me. Like Brian had mentioned in our previous efforts, we were looking at bidding all 3 projects at once. We were seeing some very severe material supply chain issues for multiple projects that we're working with right now. In conversations with vendors, subcontractors, and general contractors, they were unable to hold their prices for extended periods of time, never mind 6 years of a large magnitude project. So this we felt as though would be inflating our estimates if the project was to go out to bid as one whole project. We also had some discussions with general contractors who would be expecting to be putting a bid on this job, who had a lot of hesitation if there was going to be 3 projects that was going to be spanning over the course of 5 or 6. What we've done is we've broken out the headquarters project and we proceeded with putting that one out to bid. We've done a full pre-qualification effort where 105 contractors and subcontractors have responded to our statement of qualifications. The bid documents are 100% complete, and the bid documents have been made available to all of these pre-qualified subcontractors and general contractors as of last week. We currently had our walkthrough at the headquarters location for prospective contractors, and we're expecting filed sub bids to be due to us on the 30th of March. And on the 13th of April, we're expecting the general contractor bids. Once we receive those, we'll review with the Fire Station Building Committee and with Town Council before awarding a contract. We will also look at the alternates that are discussed in our construction documents. We hope to begin construction in the May timeframe of this year, and construction is expected to last between 20 and 24 months. After that is complete, the remaining 2 projects, we will work with the Fire Station Building Committee to see what's the best route of action, whether putting both out or going one at a time at that point. That's all I have. I look forward to providing another update one more time. I'll send it back over to Brian Walsh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. And again, I just like to also finally comment that we expect that we'll already completed looking at the bid return documents and be able to give an update on the actual pricing at the annual town meeting in May. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So a few comments. One, just reminders on how to use the Zoom webinar technology, because it has been a few months. So you'll see a Q&A button down at the bottom of the user interface. If you would use that to pose points of order you might have, and we have someone monitoring that. I won't be able to see all these as they come up, but we do have someone monitoring the Q&A. Second, if I call for someone to entertain a motion or second a motion, if you could do that through the Q&A, that would be helpful. If you would, when we vote, we'll just ask you to vote yay or nay. And if you're on the phone, I'll call for unmuting the phones, and we will ask you to say yay or nay on the phone, and we'll record those votes. And then a reminder that as we go through and you wish to discuss, to hit the raise and lower hand button, and I'll recognize people in the order in which I saw the hand go up. It would be helpful when you're concluded if you would lower your hand, because unlike at the high school, I can't tell if you're standing by the mic and wish to continue to speak, so that would be useful. Also, I spoke to a couple of our elected officials. Congressman Lynch is in attendance, just monitoring the meeting. He's asked if he could speak to us in our May meeting, as he has done for many years in the past, and I think that would be very appropriate. So welcome, Congressman Lynch. And I was contacted by State Senator Walter Timmelty. He was unable to attend tonight due to a family funeral, but just wanted me to pass along his best wishes for a successful meeting. Two other items. I was hoping that tonight was going to be an in-person meeting, but we had to make a call back in January when we were still in the middle of COVID. So for that reason, not knowing how it was going to turn out, we decided to go with remote one more time. Unless I see COVID rear its ugly head again, I'm anticipating we'll return back to the high school in May for a normal in-person representative town meeting. So I'm looking forward to that. The other thing I wanted to just put in your mental inboxes is 2 years ago, like many towns, I convened a 5-person electronic voting study committee, and they were investigating the use of electronic voting technology for the in-person high school sessions. Now, at that point, they came back with a recommendation in favor of it, but to pause until the select board thought that the funds were available. And then immediately after COVID hit, and we started actually using, as you can see, the electronic voting technology of the Zoom webinar. So I've reconvened a subset of that committee. They are speaking to some of the various vendors, because we have choices of vendor technology. We have choices to buy or to lease, and there are cost implications of those. So we'll be reviewing some of that information, and then we'll prepare warrant articles that would introduce the concept and also actually get to do a demo. So we'll invite the technology vendors in at some future meeting, and we'll run a test question, and you can see what it'll be like in the high school to use the secure voting technology. So just, I think that's all of my comments, but at the moment, I see Mr. Walker, your hand is raised. I know we haven't quite started the meeting, but you're recognized, sir.
If I raised my hand, it was, good evening, everyone. If I raised my hand, it was by mistake. Nothing to speak about yet. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. With that, we will proceed to Article 1. Now, Article 1 is quite lengthy, and unless I see an objection in the Q&A, I will waive the reading of Article 1. What we'll start with, and by the way, this is an amendment to zoning bylaws, so it requires a 2/3 vote. I'm first going to start by recognizing the chair of the planning board, Denny Swenson, and she's going to describe the planning board's thoughts on this article. They're the submitting authority. So Ms. Swenson, you are recognized. Except, excuse me, I think I have an objection by member Margaret Davis. Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Greetings. I object to not reading the warrant. Thank you.
Okay, very good. What I'm going to do is then call for a motion to waive the reading. So I will entertain a motion in the chat to waive the reading of Article 1. I see Lee Michael McLean so moves, Earl Fay seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion to waive the reading? Seeing none, if we can put up the poll. All those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. And if we could unmute the phones.
No. No. This is Chris Hodlin.
Thank you.
And no.
All in favor on the phones, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And opposed on the phones, please signify by saying no. Thank you. We can close the poll and present the results. The motion to waive reading passes 77% to 23%. So with that, I'll now recognize Ms. Swenson of the Planning Board.
Yes, thank you. Moderator Hess, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good evening. I'm Denny Swenson, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 5, Planning Board Chair, the memory care article. What we have in front of us is a choice between a large memory clinic or a different use that could be denser, taller, with more traffic and more wetland impacts to this area. At this moment, that is actually what is before us. Do we zone for a memory clinic to prevent something worse? Everyone agrees that in concept, a memory clinic is good for our town, but I also understand the real concerns of the citizens living nearby, and any level of density is a challenge for this very wet site. The footprint of these two-story buildings with 70 units is expansive and is right up against and surrounded by wetlands. This site is like a sponge, and putting a large building onto it risks the water spreading to the surrounding neighborhood. I do share that concern. The large footprint means a loss of an incredible amount of trees. Those trees currently drink a lot of water. Those large old trees absorb CO2. That many trees getting removed is a loss during a time when we need to be sensitive to holding on to our fragile ecosystem on spots like this. There's very little upland area to replant trees. I appreciate that Northbridge will do as much tree planting as they can and as they have done on their other developments like this. But most of the site that is not built out is wetland and doesn't allow enough space to replenish the trees that will be lost. This large building footprint with impervious development so close to the proposed 40B on Canton Ave and the new building going in on the abutting Winter Valley is also concerning. The wetland issues will need study and to be addressed through the Conservation Commission. And that relationship and context between the other sites deserve consideration in that process. The building footprint in between the wetlands might very well be too big, but we can't know that until the engineering takes place during special permitting. The town will need a peer review of that engineering. The paved area on this proposal crosses two streams that will need approvals and mitigation through the Conservation Commission. There are questions about the stormwater system. The water from the site will need to be absorbed on the site through new stormwater systems. That study and engineering takes place during special permit. The town will need to ask for a peer review of that complex situation. Questions have been raised about a possible home oil tank spill. The owner of the property and the developer do not think there was a spill, but they have agreed to do a soil samples or a 21E study prior to construction and prior to placing a stormwater system in that location of concern on the site. In other words, if there was a spill, it will be found during that process and it will have to get cleaned up prior to any construction there. This proposal is not a cakewalk. I see and hear many real issues and concerns. Without the engineering and the Concom study and review and approvals, I don't know that the proposal is even possible. But this is one step here. This is just zoning. We have no way of knowing that until all of the engineering and assessment work is done. The proponents believe they can make it all work within the confines of this zoning. I understand the question of why zone something without knowing if it can work. But I also understand the economic argument that it is a challenge to sink money into the engineering, the studies, and the assessments if the property owners don't know if the zoning for it will exist once they have invested all of that time and money. So while I see real challenges on the site for something this dense, this is one step here. It's just zoning. So I'm supporting zoning for a memory clinic over the worse option of a denser medical use with more traffic or an aggressive 40B down the line. The planning board voted unanimously in support of moving forward with the memory care zoning article. Thank you, Moderator Hess.
Thank you, ma'am. At this point, by prior agreement, the chair would like to recognize Mr. Ned Corcoran. Ned is a former town meeting member, but also counsel retained by Milton Hospital, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, and I think the developer of the property. Mr. Corcoran has submitted a presentation. I've reviewed that, found it appropriate. And so with that, Mr. Corcoran, turn over to you, and you have 10 minutes, please.
Very much, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. If we could move on to slide number 3, actually. I'll skip the quick presentation. In 2015, leading up to June of 2015, the town went through a very extensive master plan process. 500 plus of our citizens, many members of this body and others were involved. A lot of interest was focused on providing for seniors as they age in town. We know that we have an extensive number of independent living units available at Fuller Village, Home Inc., Winter Valley. But Milton lacks assisted living and other similar facilities as our folks age further. While there was general support for options to be available, there was a very specific call to action contained in that in the master plan. It said that we encourage Milton Hospital to pursue past proposal to develop assisted living facility on hospital-owned property located across the street from the medical institution and adjacent to senior housing. Next slide, please. This effort to rezone that property is a direct response to that call to action. The hospital conducted an extensive process, received a number of proposals for redevelopment of this property, including assisted living of greater density, affordable housing, and other denser housing options. They chose Northbridge Company and the Avita model for memory care because they believed and still believe that this was the highest, not the highest offer from a dollar perspective. It was the offer that provided highest value with the lowest perceived impact. Next, please. The property sits on Highland Street. To the upper left of this view is the hospital. To the left and to the bottom is Winter Valley. It is surrounded on two sides by Winter Valley. It is fronted by Highland Street, approximately 400 feet of frontage, and it abuts property owned by Karen Bacardi, a single family dwelling on the right-hand side. The property was historically a farm. There were 2 dwelling units that have been abandoned since prior to 2000 when the hospital purchased the property, one in the upper left-hand corner and one in the middle of the area that looks like a parking area in the middle of the site. There is a driveway that enters into the property to that building at 111 Highland Street. The site driveway follows that existing driveway. It would rebuild obviously into the property, but it follows that existing driveway. There is a second a parking area to the bottom up against property owned by Winter Valley. There are wetlands on the site. 75% of this site is upland and is buildable. Approximately 23% of this site is wet. There are 2 streams, an intermittent stream that parallels Highland Street and a separate intermittent stream to the lower portion of the plan that actually comes in from Winter Valley's property. There is a significant amount of upland and the property is developable. It is an expensive development because, as Denny said, there are wetlands to address and there are other impacts to pay attention to. The building itself is proposed to have 70 units of memory care, specialized care for Alzheimer's and related treatment. The building is 2 stories, 1 story on the left-hand side that is at sort of an upper level, and 2 stories on the right-hand side. You can see sort of a break in the middle. That to the right is 2 stories, and the second story, if you will, is below. So there is a 1-level that is consistent, and then a lower level that is built into the ground and masks the density of that portion of the building from surrounding properties. There are significant setbacks provided for in the zoning. The setback of the building from the front is approximately 138 feet. The required setback on the southeasterly side, the Bacardi side, is 50 feet. The building currently as designed is 62 feet from the property line at its closest point to the property line, and is 72 feet at the property line that is closest to the Bacardi dwelling, and the distance from the building to the Bacardi dwelling is in excess of 120 feet.
Mr.
There
Corcoran, you
is-
got about 5 minutes left.
Thank you. So the property, we think, is developable and manageable. Next slide, please. So as viewed from the front door, you see one story as it goes off to the left. The lower level sinks into the ground. It's designed to look residential in nature and to minimize this impact of scale. Next slide, please. So as I said, we propose 70 units of memory care. 2.5 stories with architectural dormers, robust setbacks, non-disturb areas, and requirements for additional landscape buffers, all of which must be approved by the planning board in the special permit process. Traffic for the memory care use is especially low. It's limited to shift changes for employees, occasional visitors, and occasional deliveries. They do serve food on a daily basis, so there'll be deliveries of food, linens, and the like, but occupants themselves do not drive. It is actually a secure facility, but occupants are securely taken care of. They do not drive. Next slide, please. The site, the zoning is actually zoning that we've adopted in the past. We did adopt zoning for assisted living on property adjacent to the old dump, the old, what I guess we'd call the horse farm. That project was never built. It was adopted in 2013. We're simply modifying language that has been previously approved that fits this site specifically. Next slide, please. We know that this is project-specific and site-specific zoning. We've been through that multiple times in the past. It is a legitimate form of zoning. It is acceptable. As I said, it'll be substantially available for longtime residents with some small number of respite beds available for people who may need short-term care. Perhaps the spouse, 2 people living at home. One is memory care issues. The other might need surgery, needs a short period of time when assistance would be available. They could be here. They'll also provide and assist in emergency services at the hospital for folks who present with memory care issues. Next slide, please. Again, the site plan, it is a significant site plan, but we think it's manageable, and we look forward to responding to all of the requirements, the very detailed, very specific requirements laid out in the zoning for plans, et cetera. Next slide, please. Of significance, its new value to the town. Authorize the conversion of what is currently a fallow residential property into a new high-value commercial taxpayer. Net new taxes are estimated at $275,000. It fills a need for providing specialized and professional care for memory care needs of local seniors and families. And we know there are a number here in town. We lost Karen Dunphy very recently, who was a memory care patient, but had to seek those services in another community. And as I said, it responds
Kathy Dunphy.
to the town's master plan process. You know, we've had plans in town. They fly around the town at 5,000 feet, and everything's good until they drop to the ground. And all of a sudden, oh, well, yes, we need memory care, but not here. We thought you were doing it over there. We don't have a lot of room in the town to do much new development. We're under siege from 40B developers. This is an opportunity to respond to a direct need within the town with a project that can be mitigated and managed successfully. Next slide, please.
If you could wrap up in a
Yep, my last slide.
minute. Thank you.
So this zoning is the first step in a very extensive and public process. We spent most of 2021 with neighbors, with the planning board, negotiating and drafting language for this bylaw that was unanimously recommended by the planning board and unanimously recommended by the warrant committee. We still have to secure a special permit from the planning board in accordance with all of the plans and requirements that are detailed in this bylaw. On a parallel track, we have to secure an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission as to how and under what circumstances the property gets developed in accordance with the town's wetland bylaw and the state's Wetlands Protection Act. Each will involve review and approval of engineering, stormwater, and a myriad of other plans, detailed analysis that would be required, and as Ms. Swenson said, will require peer review for at least some of those plans. Next slide. So we thank you for your time. We appreciate your concern and consideration. I'm available to answer questions, but I would look forward to the debate, and I request a favorable vote for Article 1 this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Corcoran. By prior agreement, I was contacted by a town meeting member, Mr. Stephen Kelleher, who is proposing a friendly amendment to Article 1. So Mr. Kelleher was kind enough to submit this in advance, in writing to me well in advance. It's been considered by the planning board, and we're displaying that up on the screen. So I'd like to recognize Mr. Kelleher. Sir, if you could unmute your microphone and just describe your friendly amendment to the audience. Yes, Mr. Kelleher is just going to speak. Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. What I'm planning to do is my amendments is to clarify some of the issues. Some of them are regarding this one in specifically is regarding the height, that the structures, the accessory structures shall not exceed 1 story in height. And if we move on to the next one. Okay, this one was regarding the stormwater. There's been a number of issues regarding the neighbors, especially on Spafford Road, regarding following guidelines and stormwater. This one makes it clear that the language that was in the proposed zoning had including reasonable requirements. I wanted to make sure that under the zoning they'll be required to follow the exact standards, not reasonable. I thought that that language was too vague and that could lead to issues. The next issue is regarding dark sky compliance. This is something that I actually worked with the planning board on. My issue is that this is an undefined term, and I don't think we should have terms that are undefined. I did work with the planning director, Tim Zawinski, regarding this language regarding International Dark Sky Association, which he agreed with and the planning board also agreed with, which seems reasonable. The next is regarding the architectural style. It basically says that any accessory structures shall be of the same materials as the main building. The next one, this is just, again, simple clarification. Building is a defined term. So again, this should be capitalized. It should be capital B. And this is an issue, again, with the egress and regarding standards. And I thought that the fire chief should be involved. He is the expert regarding anything to do with the fire, egress, and he should be definitely consulted as well as the planning board. And I think that might be it. So I would encourage fellow town meeting members to support this. I think these are all add clarification to the overall zoning to this amendment or to this article.
Thank you, Mr. Kelleher.
You're welcome.
With that, I'll just look for a second in the Q&A to the friendly amendment. If someone would say second. They support the friendly amendment. I see Scott Farrell seconds. Thank you. With that, since this is an amendment to the planning board and also the warrant committee, I'll start with the planning board and recognize Ms. Swenson. Ms. Swenson, what are your thoughts on this friendly amendment? If you could unmute yourself, ma'am.
Thank you, Moderator Hess. Denny Swenson, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 5, Chair of the Planning Board. The Planning Board thanks Mr. Kelleher for these friendly amendments, and we unanimously accept these changes as friendly amendments.
Thank you. I'd also like to just check with Select Board. Chair Conlon, the Select Board, what's your opinion of this friendly?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Katie Conlon, Chair of the Select Board and Town Meeting Member from Precinct 3. The Select Board is in support of these amendments and also thanks Mr. Kelleher for offering them.
Thank you. Lastly, I'll recognize George Asher, the Chair of the Warrant Committee. Mr. Asher, has this committee need time to take a vote, or have you voted on this friendly?
Mr. Moderator, George Asher, Town Meeting Member Precinct 6, Chair Warrant Committee. At our meeting prior to the convening of the special town meeting, the Warrant Committee voted unanimously to accept the friendly amendment as presented.
Very good. So with that, since it's a friendly, we don't need to take a vote. So thank you, everyone, Mr. Kelleher, for your thoroughness and helping the process along by writing all this down and helping our town meeting move more efficiently. So with that, members, you now have an amended recommendation before you, and we'll open up for discussion. So does anyone wish to speak to this amendment? I see the first hand raised is Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner, you're recognized. And if you could unmute.
No, I don't have any questions. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. If you could lower your hand then. Very good.
Yep, I'm sorry.
No problem. Okay, if we can mute Mr. Kelleher as well. Thank you. I see Brian O'Halloran, your hand is raised. You're recognized.
I'm sorry. I inadvertently hit the lower raise hand. I'm gonna put it down.
We'll get the kinks out of this, folks. We'll get the kinks out. I've also been contacted by two others who wish to speak to this article. The first is a citizen who has been verified by the clerk as an active registered town voter. It's Mr. Bard Hirizai, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Mr. Hirizai, if you could, we'll unmute yourself and just state your name and address and speak to this article. You're limited to 10 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, everyone. I'm Bard Hirizai. I live at 11 Spafford Road. I'm speaking on behalf of dozens of very concerned citizens, neighbors, and friends, and I hope that I'm able to get across to you in a few short minutes how big of a deal this proposed project would be for hundreds of people in this neighborhood, and why the benefits are dwarfed by the cost to hundreds of people. So if you will allow me to share my screen, Mr. Moderator.
I think we may have your presentation here.
Yes,
so
if you could prefer presenting it, that works.
We'll do that.
Well. Thank you very much. If we could move to slide 2, please. First of all, let me just say, we whipped this together over the last week. A lot of us, we're trying our best to stay on top of things. I personally and my wife, we found out about this project on July 6, 2021, when a pamphlet came in the mail on July 6, 2021, that day that there was a meeting later that day. Most of the neighborhood was away. We were just coming out of the COVID lockdown. People were happy to be able to finally get out. So even now, you'll see some names at the end now. The list is growing by the day of people who were contacting us after seeing this, of how concerned they are. There are a lot of people who are only just starting to realize what this plan entails. And basically what you're voting on tonight is changing residential land to pave the way for a 55,000 square foot facility for assisted living, as Mr. Corcoran explained. Just to put into perspective how big that is, that's 50% larger than the entire Milton Marketplace. The fruit center is 37,000 square feet per town records. The developer's buying 10 acres, but why can't they, why are they having to put it, about 25, I think the latest is 25, 30. I know Mr. Corcoran threw out some numbers, 138 feet from the street. I think the latest is actually 125. But we'll show you on the next slide. It's right up there next to, a pretty significant, taxpayer in this town, and right there, a stone's throw from a number of homes in a very thickly settled neighborhood, all the way up Highland Street, all the way down, quote, Ladder Street, Spafford, Buckingham, Martin. These are streets that will be impacted severely with this plan. It's unprecedented. We've looked at, a half dozen other memory centers in Massachusetts. Most of them are in commercial districts. But the example, the Avita example, which we'll look at in a few minutes, is one of those exceptions in residential, but it's actually quite different from what we're seeing. And in all these cases, the facility is much farther away from people's homes. This plan would increase the potential for basement flooding. This is not hypothetical. It's happened before. We'll take a look at that. And really, the traffic situation, there is no plan for the infrastructure that does not support this. It's really impossible to get there. And we'll show you, unless you use narrow streets, they're in fact narrower than the driveway that they're required to build, which, just let that sink in for a second. Your main access roads are narrower than the driveway into the facility. And we've heard about tax revenue. We saw just now an estimate of 275,000. We heard before 300,000 a year. Obviously, we need the tax revenue. Every little bit helps. But if we can just put that in perspective, that's $30 to $33 per household. That's really not a huge bump, considering the damage that it can cause and the hundreds of people that it really has profound impacts for. If you add up, just the Bacardi house and just Spafford Road, you're at over 100,000, over 300,000 in tax revenue that we've been paying for years. And a local developer. So, and it's not 300,000 versus zero. A local developer from the Dev Group Construction LLC put in a bid for 3 to 4 houses on a small dead end street, just like Highland Lane, just like Marine Road, plus a walking path, for the neighborhood. That's what it's zoned for, and that's the type of bid that we would ideally like to see there. And in this cost benefit analysis, then finally, the main beneficiary here is Milton Hospital. Obviously, they're a valued member of the community. They've been a good neighbor to us. The president, Mr. Fernandez, has done a lot these past few months to write letters to many hospital providers and delivery providers, ambulances, to ask them to please use the main entrance. Please don't use Spafford Road. We've seen some improvement, but even despite that, we still get a ton of that traffic. But the hospital would obviously benefit from some synergy there with people who need care from the hospital. They can provide better service to their customers and back and forth. We understand that, but as far as everyone else, the tax revenue is not that much incremental over what we would get if we put a small neighborhood there. And there's really no guarantee that the spots in the facility would go to Milton residents. We asked this question, and we were told that from history and using other examples, about 50% of the occupants would come from Milton, and only about 5% of the units are available for affordable housing or lower income. These are long-term dwelling units. We asked, do these count against, to help us with 40B down the line? The answer so far, I think, has been unclear, or it's not clear enough to us to understand, because if it does count, then it actually hurts us because it's only 5%. At best, it's neutral.
Mr. Hyreza, you've got about 4 minutes left.
Okay, thank you very much. So the benefits here are to the hospital, obviously, and to a handful of people in town who can actually get in and afford this. And many of us understand this, the diseases, the afflictions. Teresa O'Brien, myself, we've cared for parents who passed away in the last few years suffering with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It's devastating. It's excruciating. But for many of us, really the only option is home care that we can afford. We can't afford to pay $10,000 a month or more You know, and some of these prices, you know, start at 9, 10,000, go all the way up to 15,000 or more a month. So it's really talking about benefiting a handful of people in the hospital versus severely hurting, you know, hundreds of people. So if we could please move to the next slide, Mr. Moderator. If we, you know, look at this in context of the neighborhood, you know, I know we heard something about 73% being buildable, but really that's not, I mean, that's a little bit misleading. I shouldn't say it's not true. I can't verify that, but it's misleading because when you have streams and you have vernal pools, you can't cross them. So you really can't build on that whole area. So the reason they have to throw this all the way next to somebody's house is because they can't build it this big anywhere else. You know, as planning board chair Ms. Swenson said, the site is a swamp. We walked it. You can't take a step without landing in water. You know, doesn't matter what we do with stormwater on the site. This site is at 120, 130 feet above sea level. The rest of the neighborhood goes downhill 110, 180, all the way down. You drain it onto the site, it will start to leach down the hill. The water table will go up for the surrounding houses, many of which already have issues with some pumps working constantly. Even today, the O'Brien's at 42 Spafford, right in the quarter of Highland, there's some pumps are running every 5 minutes. You know, so you're talking about flooding people. This happened when the medical offices were built behind Spafford, and you know, a parking lot was paved. There was litigation that went on for years. It's a serious issue that we just can't write something on paper and say, oh, it'll comply with stormwater regulation. We're naive to think that we can control what happens with this amount of water. Next slide, please. Traffic. There's no way to get to this site. It is far from any major road. Highland Street, which is the address, is barely 23 feet wide, maybe 22 feet wide in places, has a partial sidewalk, only on one side, no shoulder. You know, it is very thickly settled. And, you know, the debate in one of the planning board calls was, is 22 feet currently wide enough for the driveway, or does it have to be 24 feet for this facility? The main road to get there for many of the aides, the nurses, the deliveries, the, you know, all the different things that need to get here are coming through the lattice streets, especially Spafford Road, from all points south, from points east, and from I-93, which is not shown. The only way you can get there during rush hour, because everything else is sealed off, is Spafford Road, which is 19 feet, 10 inches wide, has no sidewalks, and is getting killed right now with traffic.
So we've got about a minute or so.
Okay, thank you. And let's move to the next slide, please. You know, and just the last point there on traffic, if you look at the data from 2019, we were getting on Spafford 300 cars a day. If you look at 25 people staffing this facility full time, when you count it all up, we asked experts who work at a nursing care facility, that's what they estimated would be. 3 shift changes at 75 a day times 2 trips coming and going, 150 trips a day. And you know, that the data that we have from the DPW says 300 trips on average a day. We're talking about 50% increase in traffic. There's just no way around it. These streets are not designed for it. If we look at the Avita example, which we've been asked to do, we find something completely different. It's right off the highway, right on a main road with a wide shoulder. You don't have to drive through a neighborhood. Yes, you can see some condos there right next to it, but those were built 3 years after the memory care facility was put there. When it was built, there was nothing within 300 feet on 3 sides. And the only thing, you know, houses across the street were about 200, 250 feet. It's buried in the woods, Needham Park land, no wetlands. It is and right off the highway, completely different situation. Next slide, please. So on the last slide, you know, we just look at it too. It's 49,000 square feet. We asked them, we begged them, please consider a smaller footprint. This is a big deal for us. They said, nope, we can't build it smaller. It has to be this big, otherwise it's not profitable. Well, how come they have something that's 11% smaller at 49,000 square feet that only has 62 units, not 70, and they've been managing that for 10 years? Apparently, it's still in business. It must be profitable. So they can build it smaller. They absolutely can. This is what developers do all the time. Next slide, please. And these are just some people here. Many of us on Spafford have been aware of this for a few months. Some of these others are just learning about it. They're very, very concerned. I would imagine, you know, if you gave us a couple of weeks, we could come up with hundreds of names here. if we want a memory center and more commercial tax revenue, let's look at the whole town, decide what should go where, and not let one property owner change zoning, traffic, et cetera. We have a good offer on the table that was not selected for residential use, which is what it is. Please don't make us spend more time. We're having to hire lawyers. Those of us, we don't have deep pockets, to fight this, to prove what we already know. It doesn't make sense. The infrastructure doesn't support it. The wetland deserves to be protected and has devastating impacts for the rest of the neighborhood. So please vote no or recommend that the article be sent back for further study.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any other members' hands looking to speak to this article. I did have another individual who had requested times, and I see the hands coming up. So my tradition is to alternate between town meeting members and non-town meeting members, citizens. So I see a hand has just come up. Mr. Irwin, you're recognized.
Hi, this is Gene Irwin, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'd like to just follow up with the previous speaker. This is an abomination. This is akin to draining the Cunningham Park pool and then saying, oh, it's dry land. There's a pre-existing storm drainage system that goes all the way from Highland Lane down all the way through this property. And it was there so that the farm that was pre-existing would not wash away. This storm drainage system should have been pulled out or managed by the town of Milton back in 1999 or 2000 when the hospital bought it. In fact, they should have insisted that this storm drainage system be pulled out. It's called a municipal stormwater force system, and the town is supposed to be monitoring this water already, and they're not. And the hospital should have given the town permission and easements and recorded a budget with the town and who's taking care of the existing stormwater system there. There also appears to be a stormwater leak, not a stormwater leak, an oil leak on the property from when they demolished the little farmhouse next to Highland Street. The Conservation Commission looked at it. They noticed oil in the water, but they said, hey, maybe it's palm oil. The consultant for the Conservation Commission said to myself and Ella Wells, who's now deceased, what is the sense of preserving wetland or restoring it? And we're paying for this. He's a paid consultant to the town. This has so many things wrong with it. As the previous speaker said about Highland Street, if anyone drives down Highland Street, they'll notice the plows have taken chips out of almost every single telephone pole on the street. Some chips are as high as 14 feet off the ground from box trucks. We've already had fatalities in this vicinity. And we've had cars going off the road, crashing through fences and into swing sets. This is not at all appropriate for the site. Avita also last year or the year before with a partner spent $200 million buying 5 other senior living complexes. So that's 40 million apiece. If they were to build this place for 10 or 15 million, give the hospital 2, 3, 4 million, you're still talking less than 20 million to build it out with a $20 million profit. With that kind of money, Avita and the hospital can go anywhere in Milton. They can buy the old Pepsi Cola plant and do this project up there. They can buy the American Legion Post. Milton Hospital also has land in the back of Cunningham Park. There's a million other places that this site, this facility, this memory care clinic could go in if people wanted it. But it's just too dangerous. And I say the water is a problem. All my neighbors around here, I don't know of any who haven't had water, put it that way. So I recommend strongly a vote no in support of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Irwin. Next, what I'd like to do is recognize Mr. Douglas Henry. Mr. Henry contacted me as an attorney representing a resident and active registered voter, Ms. Karen Bacardi. Typically, you don't see attorneys of citizens present, Yet I've researched and there is some precedent for us here in the town of Milton. Also, Mr. Henry has represented Ms. Bacardi at all the planning boards, and all the participants at the town level have said he conducts himself with professionalism. So with that, Mr. Henry, we should be able to unmute you and you will be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. My name is Douglas Henry. I'm a partner at the firm of Sharon and Lodgen in Boston, and I am Karen Bacardi's longtime attorney. I actually represented her when she purchased her house at 137 Highland Street in 2003. And Karen has asked me to speak on her behalf tonight. As I've already relayed at, I think it was 8 or 10 different planning board sessions and before the Conservation Commission, Karen is opposed to this development next to her house. She is more than amenable, as the other neighbors have said, to have this developed as a residential site because that's what it's zoned for. And she moved in here in 2003 with the expectation that she was moving into a residential neighborhood. She has a very substantial house. She pays a very high number of taxes to the town of Milton, and her expectation was that this would remain a residential neighborhood. This is a 55,000 square foot development that, well, Ned Corcoran said it's currently sited, I think, 60 feet from the property line. The zoning as drafted would allow it to be within 50 feet of her property line. And I'd ask the other town meeting members if you would like to have a 55,000 square foot structure constructed that close to your property line in a residential neighborhood. It's really is not in place. I'd also like to address a point that Ned made about this proposal being part of the town's master plan that was done in 2015. There is a reference in the master plan, as Ned said, that this site should be looked at, but I don't think that was really the focus of the master plan. The master plan, I have right here, volume 1 of it, which is I think 300 or 400 pages. There's 3 volumes of it. The master plan, it starts off by saying that one of the goals of the master plan is to preserve the character of Milton's distinctive residential neighborhoods, grand estates, and open spaces. And it says at the core of the vision of the master plan is Milton is a small town atmosphere. There's a treasured contrast with urban centers along its borders. Milton is a community of neighborhoods, each of which with their own unique character. And so the section that Ned cited is actually in the section on community gathering and social capital for the town. It's not even part of the housing section. There's an extensive portion of the master plan that deals with expanding senior housing in town, but it's not related to this particular recitation. So I think that the master plan at its core wants to preserve neighborhoods in Milton, and this is anathema to what the spirit of the master plan was. Finally, I'd like to echo what Bard said in his presentation about the impacts that this will have not only on my client's property, but also on the neighborhood in general. Highland Street is a very narrow street. Right now, in order to access this property, you have to run a sewer main all the way from the entrance down Highland Street to one of the ladder streets going down to Reedsdale, and there's no sewer right in front of the site. So you have to tear up this neighborhood under construction. There's traffic issues, there's flooding issues. If you walk the site, which I have on 2 or 3 occasions with the planning board and the Conservation Commission, it is a swamp, and the area that is going to be built on is right next to my client's property. And as Bard pointed out, the reason for that is because the wetlands on the site make you move everything up there. And while it is true that there is uplands in that area, almost the entire site is in the setback area for wetlands, and so it's all under the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, almost the entire site. None of it is true uplands. And I think for all those reasons, the town, I respectfully ask on behalf of my client that the town meeting members do not support this proposal. Memory care is a very good use, and there are many other areas in town, as Gene Irwin pointed out, where this could be built that doesn't have the traffic, the wetlands, and the density concerns right next to residential neighborhood. In fact, the site that was already zoned for this use that Ned pointed out that this zoning was based on could be a site for this potential use. For all those reasons, I would ask the town meeting to please reject this Article 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. I see no other hands. Mr. Irwin, your hand is still up. If you are done speaking, if you could raise it, if you'd like to be recognized. I see they're done. Okay. I now see George Barrett and Brian Kelly. So Mr. Barrett, you're recognized.
Hi, George Barrett. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 9. I'm a physician at Milton Hospital, but I want to point out that I'm not employed by Milton Hospital or any of its affiliates. I'm an independent physician there. And I would like to support this amendment. I feel this would be a great use for this area. I think it's a win for the town. It would be $275,000 in new taxes that is sorely needed. It's a high value, low impact response to an identified need for the town for memory care. And it would provide a place for our loved ones to spend their remaining years in a place close to their family members. And we also have to remember that this is a low impact. There's going to be minimal traffic, or the traffic will be minimized because the residents do not drive. They do not use the school, so there may be no impact there. And I think that we need to remember that we're voting on a zoning change, and this still will need to be vetted through the Conservation Commission, but to make sure all the water issues, and I do respect the thoughts of the other speakers, but I would recommend a yes vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And could you remind me your precinct? I'm not sure I heard it at the beginning.
Precinct 9.
Very good. Thank you. Next, I see we have a few speakers. Mr. Brian Kelly, you're recognized.
Brian Kelly, Precinct 7. Yes, I just had a couple of questions. One is, does the hospital own any other land on the Highland Street area, either in their name or other names? And one of the concerns I have is we talk about $275,000 in possible new taxes, but there's no guarantee that this organization will stay a for-profit organization. So it could be sold to a nonprofit down the road, and we could say goodbye to those taxes. We do not get any credit towards housing. And I'm just concerned that, the hospital is becoming getting involved in the development business. Why did they buy this land in the first place? What about expansion of the hospital down the road? Are they going to be looking for other areas to park employees and things like that? Right now, I believe there's a shuttle from St. Elizabeth's for the employees. So if they own this land, why aren't they using it for the hospital? Why are they using it to generate income? Are they in financial difficulties? Why would they not want to do something that the majority of the residents in that area would like? I'm also concerned that Mr. Cochran has kind of hinted at a more denser product going over there, or development, a 40B kind of a hint. And so it always seems like it's never we're never given a choice of whether we want something. It's always like a gun to our head. And I'm surprised that the hospital would even be in that position, because it's been a good community partner. And so I don't know why that's even a threat that's been put on the table here that makes it a little difficult for us as town meeting members to do what's right for the community and also protect the residents. So that's just some of my concerns. So before I hang up, if Mr. Corcoran could let us know if the hospital does have any other land in that area that they own, that they're also considering developing down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Corcoran, can you answer Mr. Kelly's question?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, no, the hospital does not own any other land in Milton that I'm aware of. I would also, I didn't threaten anything. I'm not sure where that hint came from, but there was no hint of an alternative use that I'm representing here. So I just want to make it clear to town meeting members that there was never any intent on my part to make any hint of any other use other than the use that is being proposed here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corkman. I see three more hands, Mr. Brady, Mr. Gilmore, and Ms. Friedman Hannah. Mr. Brady, you're recognized.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you. My name is Mike Brady, a town meeting member from Precinct 9. I plan to vote in favor of the article. In the interest of full transparency, I'm the former chair of Beth Israel Milton, and I was for...
Sir, we just lost your audio.
Can you hear me
You
now?
still there?
Can you hear me?
No, you're very faint. Perhaps if you're speaking into a computer, lean as close as you can to the microphone on the screen.
Okay, is that any better?
Now you're back. Yes.
Okay.
Stay there.
Okay, thank you. I was just about to say, in the interest of full transparency, I'm the former chair of Beth Israel Deaconess
sorry.
Milton. Oops.
You're going in and out.
You know,
try
how's that?
Very good.
Okay. In the interest of full transparency, I'm the former chair of Beth Israel Deaconess Milton, where I was chair for 12 years. In addition, I participated in the decision-making that selected Northbridge. And then just as an aside, I certainly, in the comments that will follow, I don't want to minimize the concerns of the neighbors. They're real. I respect them, and I respect their willingness to voice them. Just for some context, there were three main decision criteria when we were making the decision. First, it was important that whoever we selected, that the project be consistent with the mission of BID Milton, as well as the healthcare needs of the town of Milton and the other communities that we serve. Second, as fiduciaries, that we get a fair price for the property. And I think it's been alluded to or mentioned earlier, this was not the highest bid. The bid that we received was about 3.5 times less than the bid we could have taken if we had chosen kind of the low-income housing road. And I think the rationale for the choice is consistent, one, the mission, but two, the third issue that we focused on was the impact that it would have on the surrounding neighbors. And once again, there has been some outreach over the last several years by the CEO, Rich Fernandez, and we understood the impact, and we wanted to make sure, whatever decision we made, that we balanced those three factors. And I think in the selection of Northridge and the memory care unit, I think we did that. From our perspective, if we do look, aside from our mission is not building residential housing, so it was hard for us to make that decision when we understood the needs of both Milton and our patients. We felt that Northridge was by far the least intrusive for the neighbors, and I think that had a large weight applied because of our sensitivity to the neighbors. So with all of that, I believe that the memory care unit would fill a critical need for the residents of Milton. And I do believe that Northbridge would be a responsible partner in that endeavor. So with that, I urge my fellow town meeting members to vote yes on Article 1. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. With that, I'll next recognize Mr. Brian Gilmore. Sir, you're recognized. If you could unmute, sir.
Brian Gilmore, Precinct 9, Milton. I'm in favor of the measure, and given the work that's been done as examined by the previous speakers from the Planning Board and Conservation Committee and others, I think the need is, this is the old population is growing older, like myself, and there is certainly a need for this kind of services to be done locally to help families cope with this problem. And therefore, I would like the measure to be moved forward and accepted by the members of the town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I see Ms. Friedman Hannah. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Hi, Karen Friedman Hanna, Precinct 2. I also rise to recommend a yes vote on this. I am a healthcare provider who has gone into the Avita facility in Needham multiple times for clients. And I can tell you that they are a very lovely facility. They take great pride in what their facility looks like. They are on the higher end of what a memory care facility would be like. It actually looks like you're going into a very lovely high-end hotel. They are extremely supportive of their neighborhood. They have very restricted parking things for people who are visiting. And there has never been an overflow that I have seen in any way, or any kind of congestion around the neighborhoods from when I've gone at different times of day to see different patients there. So I understand, and I can definitely understand where neighbors might be concerned about a change to their neighborhood. But I do believe that this company is very understanding of neighborhoods, and they are an organization that has been around in Needham anyway in the form that they said they would be, and they have lived up to what they said they would live up to from what I have seen and have been told. So I do support this article, and I hope others will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I have 4 more speakers, Ms. Davis, Mr. Fundling, Ms. Agostino, Ms. Felton. So Ms. Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Could they please clarify if this institution will be a for-profit or a not-for-profit, and further explain the tax implications for the town, as well as any impact of an institution on residential property value? In my limited experience, there is a negative impact on property values. Thank you.
So 3 questions. Will this be a for-profit? What is the estimated tax revenue and potential impact on property values of neighboring properties?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think I'll start with Ms. Swenson of the Planning Board. Do you have that answer, or wish to direct it to someone?
Yes, can I direct that to Mr. Corcoran?
Yes, please. Mr. Corcoran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ned Corcoran. It is a for-profit entity. The tax implications are, we think, are positive. $275,000 plus in new tax revenue to the town. I'm not sure I can speak directly to the issue of detriment or other impact. Milton's a high-value town. My own experience selling a house recently is that the market is what the market is. I don't see any reason to be concerned that property values would be otherwise impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Swenson, you might want to mute. With that, we have Mr. Fundling, you're recognized.
Hello.
Hi.
This is Jay Fundling, Town Meeting Member Precinct 3. I would like to rise to support this article for both practical and moral reasons. The practical reason is that people in this town are often looking for development that will add to the tax rolls with minimal impact on town services. This is an easy win. This is a great addition with minimal impact on the town overall. And for the moral reasons, as a community, we should provide for the weakest of us. We built a hospice facility in this town recently to help people in their final days. Now we can have a facility to help families in a tragic time. I had a loved one who was in a memory care facility this past year. I didn't care which city or town it was in, but I appreciated that it was nearby, and I was glad that the place existed to help us with that difficult time. The people in this neighborhood have chosen to live near a hospital. While this facility won't legally be part of the hospital, it's still doing the work of taking care of the sick and will be a great addition to this neighborhood of healing. So for those reasons, I support this article.
Thank you, sir. I see Ms. Agostino and Ms. Felton. Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Diane DiTullio Agostino, representative of Precinct 9. I have several points to make that range from emotional concerns for these families in the area who I represent, as well as the concern for the elderly that it's very easy to use and pull on heartstrings when we hear about providing for the elderly. The lot size for one, for a 55,000 square foot building, the size of the Milton Marketplace, is way too small because it is a swamp. It has an awful lot of wetlands. The area will be highly impacted, not slightly impacted. The number of employees, the visitors, the deliveries, they have substantial need for supplies in assisted living residences. They also will need our services of first responders. So there's a financial cost to the town that has not even been calculated out of that 270-some thousand taxes. A 70-unit commercial assisted living resident is too large. It's going to have more than 70 residents in it. There is no identifying how many daytime employees will be coming for all sorts of various services. You have services of physical therapists, you have visiting nurses. The list is endless. And town meeting members have their own personal stories. So I'll go back to January 7th, 2013, when I met with Milton State Representative at the time, Walter Timothy. He met me regarding concerns with the Massachusetts regulations of assisted living residences. So yes, it's been an 8-year study, personal study, and many, 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 many unfortunate learnings of what some of the issues are. He admitted these are nothing more than rental apartments, and that Massachusetts has some of the worst regulations in the country, referring to the Mass General laws that govern assisted living residents. I have been very involved in moving for improvement in those laws, but it's very slow. In fact, if you try to look up the actual statistics for the proposed owner of this property, you can't readily find them. How many residents have one activity of daily living they can't do versus how many have 6 activities of daily living that they can do. So those are some basic things that, unless you've really studied mass law, studied how the Executive Office of Elder Affairs looks into certifying these places, you may not realize that there's a real concern. And I am not inferring in any way, because I've never been to any of their other places, but elder abuse comes in many forms. It may be viewed only as a physical abuse. Some may know it includes emotional abuse. Few realize that financial exploitation of the elderly is a billion-dollar industry. And finally, many, even in the elder care industry, do not realize that protecting the elderly from neglect, that even neglect is a form of abuse. I am not implying, as I repeat, that the owner of this project or a proposed project has any of these concerns. But today, once again, when I went to the Executive Office of Elder Affairs site, you can't quickly pull up what type of residence is this business renting their apartments to currently in their other locations. I asked their representative for that information. He wasn't aware of it and would not have provided it. It looks like a lovely high-end hotel, but the financial impact, again, for the first responders that are going to have to go there. the impact on the fact that the looks are the most deceiving thing about some of these places. And I've been in many of them, unfortunately. So what do we do? Do we just say, oh, this is perfect because Milton Hospital is proposing it? This is perfect because the planning board agrees with it, although I believe it was the planning board that suggested that, you know, some other high intensity, you know, 40B or something. I forget the exact term that was used, but I believe it was the planning board's presentation. And then we have the warrant committee supporting it. But Mass General Law 19D requires living in an assisted living residence that you cannot require skilled nursing care. And that's why I wanted the statistics. We're all thinking, okay, these people will just have dementia. It's a memory care unit. That is not the case, as many of you know, whether it's dementia or full-on Alzheimer's or anything else. Many of these individuals, many of these elderly family members lose the ability to take care of their 6 activities of daily living. And 60%, the information you can find on the Executive Office of Elder Affairs website, it's now more prominent than it was 8 years ago when even the Boston Globe couldn't find it. 60% of the 17,000 some residents in assisted living residences in the state of Massachusetts medically require skilled nursing care. Now, you are allowed to stay in assisted living residence for up to 90 days until you can find a rehab or a nursing home or get care in your own home. But after those 90 days, Mass General Law 19D requires that you move out. You can move in, but once you deteriorate, you must move out. The Mass General Laws, enforcement of those laws is allowing the neglect of many of these residents because they don't move them out. And today I requested that information and didn't get it. And I'm sure it's buried somewhere. Lastly, the residents directly across the street, I believe it's former town meeting member who has already spoken. They, you know, would expect a residential development because it's residential land. And the abutting property of long-term town meeting member Ella Wells and her family will definitely be impacted because they're on the other side of the property from the Bacardis. Ella spent many, many hours and days of her final days standing up, investigating, and researching this project. She was vehemently opposed to it. It's a large for-profit commercial residential apartment building that is putting a bow on top because they're calling themselves what they will include a memory care unit. The Wells children are unable at this time to speak of their objection, of their mom's objection to this article. And they have approved my speaking on their mom's work and her concerns and what these young children have now learned about some of the very difficult facts of living in the town of Milton. That one day you can have the most serene, beautiful, peaceful home, and just with one town meeting night, that can all be turned upside down, has a very large commercial building crops up right next to you. And I'm sure the representative who spoke on behalf of Mrs. Picardi, I'm sure she feels the same way. The huge size, the taking of residential land that has the neighbor's presentation, which I was very impressed to receive that today, would provide substantial tax dollars when in reality, there will be many expenses to it when beautiful homes with high taxes could simply be placed there without worrying about displacement of water. The wetlands are a real concern that some oil had leaked from the structure, that old structure that our town turned their back on and allowed Milton Hospital to just leave there for years. It was a fire hazard.
Ms. Agostino, you've got about a minute left.
Thank you very much. If any one of us had that type of property on our land, none of us would have been able to keep it there. But Ella was committed to speaking at town meeting on any article she found to be deficient and more importantly, on any article that would have had a serious negative impact on her community, the town of Milton. Negative impact is a mild understatement of the Milton marketplace size for-profit business that is being proposed on this location. Please do not let the pull on your heartstrings cloud the real concern of what the developer will build, what the less than caring mass general laws will allow as far as services go, and for the many residents that have endured the ever expanding hospital in this area. I ask you to either vote no or refer it back for a more reasonable size project. And in honor of Ella and on behalf of Nika, Max, and Tusha, I beg you once again to vote no, to take residential property, to take a swamp, to destroy further the middle of Milton that cannot physically nor consciously endure this ill-conceived, enormous proposed project. I implore you to vote no and not to always sell out for profit. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Just one thing for our Zoom admins, is Mr. Walsh in the panelist?
Correct. His hand is raised. We can move him.
If you could move him just to the participants, I don't think he's gonna, so that way I'll keep him in order. Next we'll go to Ms. Felton, please.
Hi, yes, Deborah Felton, Precinct 2 Town Meeting Member and Executive Director of Fuller Village. And I want to say that one thing, once this, if this zoning prevails, and I do support it, there is still a very long process to go before the planning board, and I'm assuming the Conservation Commission. So I want town meeting members to remember that. And yes, I have so many families who need to have memory care for family members who are now living in Fuller Village. And there is a need from that. And that is the present time. That is for people who are here. And I really believe that this property can be developed in a responsible way. And I do urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I see Ms. King, Mr. Collins, and Ms. Clark. Ms. King, you're recognized. And Mr. Walsh, if you still wanted to be recognized, if you could raise your hand again in this pool.
Right.
But Ms. King.
Virginia King, Precinct 3. I know that one of the things that we are very concerned about in Milton is getting ahead of the curve on affordable housing. We're at about 5% right now, and we need to be at 10% so that we can have more say in where 40Bs might be going, as opposed to being able to run roughshod over our zoning. So I noticed that 5% of these 70 units will be for affordable, for lower income people. That we lose on that. Then we lose. We don't get any better off on getting to our 10%. And we have so many 40Bs right now that the Board of Appeals is having trouble handling them all. And that's with statutory delay factors that we're able to take because we have so many units in front of the Board of Appeals currently. This is going to perpetuate that, and we're never going to get ahead of the curve and be able to put something forth that we decide as a town that we want to do for low income housing, and we need to do that. So while I'm aware that there is a need for assisted living, it's not a panacea. I was the guardian for my mother-in-law who had dementia while my husband was overseas in Iraq many years ago, and they're basically they're not called rooms, they're called apartments, even though they are just rooms. And that means that we have 70 more units in town. And we only have about, what, 3.5, a little less than that, affordable units going into this. That doesn't help us at all. It doesn't help us at all. So I would caution people to look at that, and let's try to do something that fits all of our needs. This doesn't help us on affordable housing, and that is something that I know that we're all concerned about. So I would ask you to consider that, and to vote no on this, because it doesn't address that, as well as what some of my other fellow town meeting members have been saying on the impact of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we'll move to Mr. Collins, then Ms. Clark, and Ms. O'Donnell. Mr. Collins, you're recognized. And if you could unmute, sir. There you go.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you're good to go.
Thank you. My name is Webster Collins. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9, but also for over 50 years. I've been in the commercial real estate business in Boston with tremendous experiences in land. The town meeting has heard me speak when I opposed uses of land because it was not proper. I have invested my own money to take land out of development to save land development from 40B. I live this daily. It is important for all town meeting members and everyone to know that you have heard misstatements because people are not in the real estate business and because they do not really look at land holistically. And that's what I would like to try to do in this response. And that holistic response that we have here is this is not high density development by any stretch of the imagination. This is 10 acres of land, not a dense development where the building that is being put on it is being made the equivalency by using the slope of the land. It's being hidden down behind under it. It is a beautiful design, perfect for the neighborhood, enhances the neighborhood, and blends out the use of the hospital and gives Milton what it needs desperately. Another arrow in its quiver to make it what it really is a first-class community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Ms. Clark. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jill Clark, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. A couple of speakers tonight have mentioned that this is just zoning and there are a number of other parts of this process. I'm wondering if perhaps the planning board could speak to, as the process goes forward and there are additional studies taken, the planning board would have to look at this, the Conservation Commission would have to look at this. If there are significant concerns raised in that process, particularly around the environmental impact and flooding issues that have been raised for abutters, what is the process or mechanism to make changes to the proposal that are available to the planning board or the Conservation Commission?
So your question is for the planning board, what are their process to make changes to the proposal?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Swenson, can you answer that for us?
Yes, I'm going to ask our planning board member, Kathleen O'Donnell.
Thank you, Ms. O'Donnell, you're recognized.
Thank you very much.
We lost you, Ms. O'Donnell.
Sorry,
Now you're back.
I just wanted to say two things, Mr. Moderator. One is that the beds in a memory care unit do not count towards our subsidized housing inventory. There's been a lot of talk about that, but they do not. They are exempt from that count, so that won't have any effect on our numbers for our 40B. Secondly, as we have said many times, this is just the zoning. It could be used by this particular developer or some other developer. This is just adopting the zoning. There is a process that clearly will be before the planning board should this application be filed under this zoning that would address the peer review would be looking at stormwater. The Conservation Commission would be addressing the conservation issues, those kinds of environmental issues. So this is just the start of a process, not even close to to an end. And a traffic study as well. Looking at the ladder streets, looking at the improvements that would be necessary to Hillside to support the project. We've already discussed many times, what the driveway would look like, what the fire department access would be, all those kinds of things would be all part of a pretty extensive process at the planning board. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Clark, did that answer your question?
Not exactly. I guess I was hoping you could outline in it very briefly what some of those steps would look like, and if the planning board during that process would have the power and authority to make significant changes in a given proposal.
Ms. O'Donnell?
Yeah, well, we do in fact have a pretty significant process for any of those people who have been, doomed to watch our meetings. Because we have gone, we've had spent, months and months on the site plan review process, on special permits for all kinds of projects that have come before the planning board. So we have the ability to hire peer review consultants to look at traffic, to respond to submissions that are made by the developer themselves. We've in fact had a long time home in the Butte conference room of the projects with all built out, showing the development. So for Walcott Woods, so it's a pretty extensive process, and obviously members of the public are invited to participate, to attend. I don't know if they'll be in person or they'll be on Zoom or some other highfalutin new technology. But the concerns of the neighbors and the concerns of citizens in the town with a project that gets submitted to us all go through that process at the planning board. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Ms. Conlon of the Select Board. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. The Select Board would like to weigh in on this article. We are in strong support of Article 1, and we urge town meeting to adopt this article, and for several reasons. And then I'd like to respond to one issue regarding other land available in the town. We know that there's a real need for memory care facility and services in this community. As other speakers have stated, we have a large senior population, and we have many housing options for our seniors and those who are aging, but we don't have a facility or a service that would provide this advanced level of care for family members of ours, residents of this town, longtime residents who may find themselves in need of these services. And this would be really a needed service and a welcome addition to our community, in our belief. And again, we're talking about zoning at this stage. We don't have before us, and we're not the body that would act on a permit application. Issues about stormwater and traffic and other impacts that have been raised would all be directed to the planning board or the Conservation Commission in the appropriate forum, assuming the zoning passes. It goes through the process before the Attorney General's office and comes back to us in approved form. And only at that stage would an application be able to be submitted. So there are many opportunities to hear the specifics of an application. And as Ms. O'Donnell stated, it could be this applicant, it could be the applicant represented by Mr. Corcoran, it could be another applicant that may be able to use this zoning. But those issues would all be vetted by the appropriate elected board, in the case of the planning board, or the appointed Conservation Commission. And all of those members have a lot of expertise in different areas of conservation. There are synergies with the hospital, and I think we can't emphasize enough the value of having an acute care hospital such as Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital Milton, which is part of a large healthcare system. That is a substantial benefit for Milton as well as our neighboring communities. And there are a lot of synergies here between the hospital and this proposed use across the street. It's been referenced by Mr. Brady and by Mr. Corcoran and other speakers that the hospital had other proposals on the table, and the hospital was looking for an institution or purchaser that would be a good fit for the town, as well as fulfilling their fiduciary obligation to the hospital in generating revenue for the hospital. As others have stated, this would be a less dense, less intense use and generate less traffic than some other potential development proposals other than a single family residence. It was referred to that there was interest from a housing developer who would put up units of housing where people are driving out to work in the morning is a very different traffic impact than memory care patients who will not be traveling. The staff would be coming to and from the hospital at shift changes, and there may be visitors at different times, but there would not be the rush hour impact and other traffic impacts on the community. And lastly, there's been questions about, well, let's just find some other property in town where we could locate a memory care facility, because everyone recognizes there's a lot of value to that type of facility. We asked town meeting members to keep in mind, the town has been looking for land for a new school building for some time. We also have committees that have been looking at town-owned parcels for housing purposes. And in each case, whether it's the school or whether the housing interest, finding many challenges. We do have an article going to town meeting in May regarding the school project and a land swap, but that's after 3 years of study and work by committees that are looking at different properties. Most of the town is built out, and there aren't as many freestanding parcels that are large parcels that are available for purposes such as this. So the select board is in strong support of this zoning article, and we ask town meeting members to keep in mind what is before us and what is not before us, and what the role of the elected planning board and the conservation commission would be once we get to the stage of an application, should we get beyond this evening. So thank you, town meeting members, and thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, ma'am. I see two hands remaining, Mr. Cocello and then Ms. Agostino. Ms. Agostino, since it would be your second opportunity to speak, I'd like to recognize all the first-time speakers first and then come back to the second time. So with that, Mr. Cocello, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Anthony Cicchello, Precinct 4 Town Meeting Member, and new Chair of the Board of Trustees of BID Milton. Let me start out by saying there's been a lot of discussion about the hospital tonight. I personally couldn't be more proud to be associated with the hospital. I think if there's anything the last 2 years have taught us, it's the value of a strong community hospital. And that's what we have in town. The dedication and work of all of our physicians. You heard George Barrett earlier. He's not an employee, but he's a physician up at the hospital. The work of our nurses, the work of our dietary people, our cafeteria people, all of those employees that have worked so hard to keep our community safe, that have cooperated with the town. I think the hospital is an enormous value to the town. And as long as I'm chair, I'll probably be talking to you all about the hospital. But Mike Brady, the former chair, talked a lot about the process that we went through in evaluating what were we going to do with a property that the hospital had owned for a substantial period of time. One thing I can tell you is that no one that I talked to in the neighborhood or anywhere around wanted us to put a medical office building over on that site. No one wanted us to put parking over on that site. I personally, and I think a lot of us, became convinced that it would be a great challenge to put a direct hospital use on that site, even though the adjacencies from the hospital perspective were good. But we've been talking about this for well over a decade as to what we could do with this parcel of property. And the town's been talking about it for well over a decade. And those discussions time and time and time again have come back to the donut hole in the available services in the town of Milton for its seniors. And that was assisted living, and even more so memory care. And in 2015, It was not just an afterthought to throw in a reference to this site should be very strongly considered for assisted living. No, there was a lot of thought put in that, and that was not a new and novel concept. And in fact, we believe that through the process that we went through, balancing the issues as Mr. Brady talked about, we got a very good operator, owner, developer, owner, long-term operator to work on this site. Many of us have gone to some of the Avita facilities in different communities. We've talked to people in the communities where these facilities were sited, and Northbridge is a good neighbor. They provide excellent services. There was reference earlier to some of the challenges of seniors and and challenges of providing assisted living and what model of assisted living. This group has provided very good services to the folks that they serve day in and day out. We partnered with them in this project because we thought that they would be a big community asset. I think at the end of the day, you've heard a lot about this project tonight. If you've been following this for many months, you've heard a lot about what the plan is for this project. I see this as an enormous win for the hospital because we'll have a great service and will contribute to community health, which we're dedicated to doing. It's a huge win for the town because it's going to get $275,000 a year, plus or minus. Over time, it'll be a lot more plus in tax revenue that no one can sneeze at. And most important, it fills a community need. It's amazing when you start to talk to people about their experiences with parents and grandparents and others. I'm getting to the age where all of my friends and I am dealing with parents having challenges as they age. The stories that people tell about having to go so far, or one spouse going into a facility and it's too far for the other one to get there. This is a community need that we're ready to fill. A couple other stray points I just want to talk a little bit about. In the overall scheme of things, this is a relatively low density traffic user. There were numbers thrown around about 150 cars per day, et cetera. Northbridge operates these facilities all over the state and all over New England. Those numbers are vastly exaggerated. They know how many trips are in there, and it's substantially less than that. There was concerns about you can't turn left from 7 to 9, so everybody's going to be not going in certain places. Everybody's at work by 7 o'clock on the first shift. The people will be directed the employees will be directed as to how they have to approach the facility. We heard a lot about the process. I mean, Milton is a process town. The Milton way is very specific zoning and a lot of process all along the way. It drives certain people on the planning board and elsewhere nuts, but it's a process that gives neighbors a lot of involvement all through the process. The neighbors have been very involved in this process up to now, and they'll have an opportunity to make the project better and better and better as it goes along. There's a lot of process left. There's a lot of opportunity left. I think this is an enormous win for the town. I hope you'll vote to support it and pass this zoning amendment, and then it can move through the rest of the process. I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, I see Ms. Burns. You're recognized. If you could unmute. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just had one question. If
If you could
this,
just introduce yourself and your precinct.
oh, sorry, GD Burns, Precinct 6.
Thank you.
I had one question, which was, if this article is approved, does that mean that in the future, no residential development could be built on this property? Does it completely switch it to a different zo- you know, zoning plan, basically?
So you want to find out if this is passed tonight,
Mhm.
does it preclude residential development in the 10 acres where the work with it?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. Any other questions or is that it?
That's it.
Okay, I think I'll go to Ms. Swenson. Member of your panel like to speak to that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, the question was, if this passes and it's currently residential zoning, can any other residential zoning, could residential zoning be built on this property or let's say around this property? I think that's the member's question.
Yes, just one moment. I'm consulting with my fellow members. I
Okay.
think, one moment. Okay, so it's still a zone. This is an overlay, so then you would have the option of residential or this new zoning. So that you would still have both options. Well, you would still have the residential option. This would be an additional option that would be created tonight.
Ms. Burns, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. I see no other first-time speakers. I just see Ms. Agostino. So with that, we'll go to Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Diane DiTullio Agostino, Precinct 9. And I have a few questions, several of them to the town planner, Tim Zerbinski, if I said that correctly.
You did? Yes.
Okay. The 10 acres where the proposed site is, of those 10 acres, how many of those acres is the actual building on? Because looking at in fact, I'm surprised, do we have the planning board's picture that could be put on the screen of the acreage?
Yes, let me just check. Lynn, if you could go back to Mr. Corcoran's presentation that had the land schematic. Is that the one, Ms. Agostino?
Whichever one, if the town planner has his own or with the planning board.
Let us pull it up here and you should be able to see it. Just
In a situation like this, the planning board feels that it's best for the applicant to provide his measurements for the plan.
okay, so ma'am, is this the document you wanted?
Yes, if they could possibly enlarge it. So the first question is of the 10, if they could enlarge it, but keep the whole. So is that outline that we're looking at, all of the dashes? I think part of it's still missing on the bottom. Thank you. Is that the 10 acres of the site where all the dashes are? It almost looks like an L. Is that the 10 acres? And then how many of those acres, see how the building is very, I know this was a big thing to Ella that, and I understand they've decided to build down so that the height should not be an issue. However, of those 10 acres, how many acres are actually taken up by the building and what is the peak height of the building? That's the first question. Because looking at the graph, it certainly isn't in the discussion of saying that, well, there's 10 acres, that it's not dense, but looking at the picture, it certainly appears to be densely situated there. And then the next question has to do with the number of acres that Beth Israel Deaconess Milton Hospital is situated on. Many of the, I don't think we have a picture of that, but many of the acres, but I'm sure the town planner would have an idea. How many acres of Beth Israel Deaconess Milton Hospital are actually above ground, and even there's a 2-lot parking garage that's all above ground. How many acres of above ground parking spaces does Milton Hospital have? And where are the studies of any projected memory care unit, assisted living residents, whatever, to meet the needs of the residents have ever been done, so that on the actual site, parking spaces would be moved into the underground, because many buildings do these days. I don't know, because the hospital's on a hill, I don't know of any specific wetland issues to the neighbors that would be abutting that property. You know, the neighbors or some town precinct members may know of some, but have any, when we talk about, oh, there's no land in town, Milton Hospital is definitely sitting on quite a bit of acreage. I don't know how much, and it's secluded with the foliage throughout the area, which is beautiful. But
Ms. Agostino, just a moment.
Yep.
A member has raised a point of order. Mr. Furs, you're recognized for your point.
Hi, thank you. Brian Furs, Precinct 10. These items that are being raised feel like they're very project specific to me, as opposed to having any relevance towards the actual zoning provision. So I'd ask that these be deemed irrelevant to the question at hand, and that we move this to back to that those items be addressed by the planning board as part of a project approval if this zoning amendment is deemed approved by this board. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, my points are all raised in response to comments made by members of the different boards and committees, as well as town meeting members.
Well, ma'am, I think your points about the outline of the building project seem relevant. Acres of BID Milton and above ground parking and such seem outside the scope of this article, in my view.
However, the chair of the board of the select board specifically said, and many other members have discussed, that we've always looked all over town, there's nowhere to build anything. So it's absolutely within the scope of the previous discussion, and that's the only reason I thought of this point. So that's my second question. The third question, that's not me, that's Brian. That's Brian blowing his nose.
Understood. Okay, if we could mute Mr. Furs.
And then my third point is this is, oh God.
There we go. You're set now, Ms. Agostino.
This is not a facility. Mass General Law, recent rulings regarding assisted living residences have identified them as rental apartments. They're just rented apartments. They're not facilities in any way, shape, or form. So my question is, does the language in this article in any way, if this assisted living residence memory care unit did not go in here, are we opening the door that we've now changed the zoning for this type of complex, that someone else could go in and put an apartment complex, apartment rental unit complex in, or even put a 40B in? I'm not sure if the language specifically would deny that based on the Mass General Law identifying the assisted living residences as rental apartments. So
Thank
those
you.
are the
Okay.
three questions.
I've got your three questions. Okay. I think I'll take them one by one. The questions on the outline, Mr. Cocello, I may ask you to speak to that. So that was, do the dotted lines represent the 10 acres? How many of those acres are occupied by the building? What's the peak height of the plan as submitted here? Are you there, Mr. Cocello? I'm sorry, not Mr. Cocello, Mr.
Yeah.
Cork. Sorry, pardon me.
It's Ned Corcoran. Would you like me to answer?
Yes,
Mr.
please, Ned.
Moderator?
Thank you. My mistake. Yes.
That's all right. The property in question is showed in the green. It is all the property that is outlined. It is sort of shaped like the state of Utah lying on its side. That is all of 10.5 acres. I think the next question was, what is the height of the building? The height of the building from the finished grade would be 35 feet to the peak of the roof, which is the standard height that's allowed within the town of Milton for residential buildings. The height from the point that is closest to Ms. Bacardi's, taken from the ground prior to construction, must be only 25 feet and 1.5 stories, so that one full story is buried into the ground at that location. There are, as somebody said previously, this zoning is very specific to a memory care development. It's defined in the zoning, may not be used for any other purpose. These are not rental apartments. As strictly apartments, the units do not have kitchens. They are not available to be considered, as Ms. O'Donnell said, they're not available to be considered as units that would be added to the town's subsidized housing inventory. There is a 5% provision that is consistent with that was not changed. It was the bylaw proposal for the original zoning for the other site, 5%, but that is, the 5% don't count as affordables on our affordable inventory, and the total of the 77 units do not count either as units on the overall housing inventory. I think the last question I think I heard was something about parking and underground parking. There is no.
Actually, I'll help you with that. It was how many acres of the 10.5 are occupied by the building?
Slightly more than one.
Yeah, 55,000 square feet divided by 44,000 square feet would be, 1.25 acres roughly, right?
It's actually 55,000 gross square feet, I think, is the building. So a portion of that is on 2 stories. So it's
okay.
closer to 40,000 square feet.
Understood.
That is, close to an acre.
About an acre. Very good.
And there is no underground parking.
Thank you. Can you answer the questions on the BID Milton acreage? They were asking about how many acres does BID Milton currently occupy?
I
No.
have no idea.
Mr. Cocello, is that possible you have that answer? If not, we may have to get back to you, Ms. Agostino, if we don't have that present here.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I specifically did not ask the planning board nor the developer for the answers. I struggled to make sure I said the individual's name right. I requested that you would request the town planner to address the questions, because as the town planner, he would have such answers. And while I appreciate that the developer's representative identifies 10.5 acres, the question was how many acres the actual building takes up. And while the rental apartments do not have kitchenettes or that type of amenities in the rental apartment units, that's what how Mass General Law considers them, rental apartments. And then the town planner should also have the answer to the acreage of the hospital and potentially the acreage of their parking spaces.
I will see if the town planner has access to that information. Mr. Chewinski, are you with us online?
Yes, I am. If you gave me 20 minutes, I could figure this all out. If it's important for town meeting to have that information, I don't have it at my fingertips, unfortunately. So I would have to do a little bit of digging.
Ms. Agostino, I don't think we're going to get that answer in 20 minutes.
I would think it'd be very important to understand, if we're talking about this not being high density, virtually every proponent to promote a yes vote has stated that. I'm looking at a diagram, and I think it's important if we go on to another question and give the town planner time, because we certainly don't want to just wait, but This is one of the key comments that's been made regarding this area.
Ma'am, we'll do our best to answer questions live during town meeting that were not answered in advance, and sometimes those may not be possible. So why don't we go to your last question, which you said rental apartments are not a facility, and if this facility is not located here, have we changed the zoning for, let's say, an apartment complex? Did I get that right?
Yes, would the language be met because of the Mass General Law with the language that these residences, and I noted that it was once again referred to as zoning for a memory care. However, I did confirm today with the developer's attorney that they will be certified under the Executive Office of Elder Affairs has assisted living residences. That's where the language comes under the law. Within the assisted living residences certification, they can then identify themselves as a memory care unit.
Okay, I'm going to go to the planning board and ask them for an interpretation on this. If I need to contact town council, he's right around the corner. Why don't I go to Ms. Swenson? Ms. Swenson, can you answer this question about the impact of zoning if this facility is not ended up located here? Or do you need a moment?
One moment, if you could just give me one moment.
Yes.
Section 1 of the zoning says that this would only be zoned for memory care use. Does that answer the question that Diane asked? Could you repeat the question that Diane asked?
Yes, she was stating, if we pass this article and the facility is not located on this land, does that permanently change the zoning so that, let's say, an apartment complex could then occupy the same land?
No.
The answer is no. Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Agostino, I think we've been able to answer the building outline and your zoning question. I don't think we're going to get the number of acres of BID Milton. I'd rather not wait 20 minutes for that.
Mr. Moderator, if the language only allows for memory care use, however, the certification of the residence comes under assisted living residence, then the language is not specific to Mass General Law applies. And I think that someone should check with town council, because I definitely confirmed with the attorney that it's under the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. That's how the certification is approved. And I mean, I've seen many of the certifications and the applications for years on this issue. So I'm surprised that nowhere in the language did it state certification of assisted living.
So, Ms. Agostino, Ms. Swenson, why don't you pause for a minute? Why don't you and town council and I just confer for a minute? We'll just try to get a definitive answer here. And I see there's a point of order on exceeding the 10 minutes. I think it's the going back and forth and getting clarity on this. So I'm providing a little leeway. I'll be right back. Okay, Ms. Agostino, I've been speaking with town council. I'm going to restate the question as I understand it, and we'll have him answer it. So the question is if this zoning article is passed tonight, and yet the appropriate permits for putting this memory care unit are not approved, has the change of has this zoning article opened the door such that other types of facilities, like an apartment complex, could be permitted on that site? I think I got that right. So I'd like to recognize Town Council Kevin Freitag. Could you attempt to answer the question, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. The answer to the question is no. The special permit requirements are set forth in this article, and they would all need to be satisfied in order for a special permit to issue. I don't think that the suggestion that an apartment building could be built here would pass the special permit test, because that's not what's being described in the bylaw as proposed.
Okay. I also heard a partial answer that this has also been narrowed down to memory care in this zoning per the neighbor's request. Is that right? Mr. Freitag? Or Ms. Swenson, perhaps you can answer that point for me.
Yes, that is correct. That was a concession that the proponent gave in response to neighborhood impact. So it was narrowed from, medical care down to memory care, and assisted living care down to memory care, because it would mean less impact, less traffic, and other things that could have impact on the abutters and neighbors. So it was a move in a positive direction for the community.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Agostino, I just talked to the town planner. He's trying to get your answer on the acreage, but he will try and see if we can get it. Meanwhile, I've had some other hands get raised. So I see Ms. Peterson. Ma'am, you're recognized. If you could unmute. Ms. Peterson, could you unmute? There you go. Nope. Okay, perhaps she's raised her hand.
There, that's it. It was an accident.
There, we got you now. Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go to Ms. Jagayas, Mr. Furs, and Mr. Funling.
Yes, good evening. To answer the question about how much could be buildable, Section 4 of the zoning sets a requirement that a building shall cover no more than 16% of the existing buildable area of the lot. And that area does not include wetlands or land within wetland buffers or vernal pools or land within 100 feet of vernal pools. And the floor area ratio shall not be greater than 23% of the building area. So those are the dimensional standards that would have to be met in this special permit application.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. By the way, if so, I see in the chat, members are saying they wish to move to vote. If you could raise your hand and I'll recognize you in sequence. Meanwhile, we have Mr. Furs.
Thank you, Brian Furs, Precinct 10. I'll be better about muting at the end of this time. Sorry about that last time.
Thank you.
Just wanted to, in addition to what Ms. Gaius just said, point out the fact that coverage area, in addition to, you have coverage area, which discusses the 16% of the area of which upon which there may be a building footprint, and then 23% dictating the amount of area that could be built as a ratio to the entire lot area. That is what I was referring to in my point of order. This would be something that the planning board would determine as part of any application for a building being built. It would take into account what the acreage that Ms. Agostino is asking about and determine whether or not this application or any application met that criteria. So I believe it is out of scope of what this board is being asked for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furs. I also see Ms. Agostino. I did get an answer back from the town planner. What he was able to determine is the total acres of BID Milton is 22 acres now. He was not able to get answers on the amount of acreage of above ground parking, I think, within the confines of our meeting tonight. Lastly, I see Mr. Hyrizai, one of the members. Sir, you've had your hand raised and it's your second opportunity to speak. If you could be very brief, because you did use your full 10 minutes before. So you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, everyone. I'll keep this quick. I just wanted to make one comment in response to two comments, sort of questioning the validity of our estimates on the traffic and the individual trips to and from the proposed memory care center. We spoke to a nurse director at a who has experience at a nursing home, and we got numbers for 1 to 2 receptionists, 4 nurses, 8 assistants, 3 to 4 housekeepers, 4 maintenance, including interior and exterior, 3 administration, and then a number of specialists and additional therapists on a daily basis, ranging 4 to 8. So on average, about 25 per shift. Shift starting from 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7. That's 3. Each of those goes one way or the other. It's very easy. You get to 150 individual trips to the site. That doesn't include garbage collection or deliveries of oxygen tanks, medical supplies. And oh, by the way, because it's a wetland, you can't just plow snow into the wetland. You have to have dump trucks come and truck it out. So all of those things contribute to a lot of traffic. So this idea that it's lower impact than 4 houses is just simply not factual. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm just going to check with town council on one other item, and I will be right back.
Everyone, while Mr. Hiss is doing that, if the caller with the phone number ending in 643 could identify themselves.
This is Megan Russell of Precinct 1.
Could you repeat that, please?
Megan Russell, Precinct 1.
Thank you.
Mhm.
A couple things, folks. I've received one other question that came through on a sidebar about Mass General Law and Town Council doing some research. That is a lengthy process that I think is one, difficult for us to get done live in town meeting. We've been at this for over 2.5 hours. I think that could be a question that could have been asked in advance or could be addressed during the approval of these buildings going forward. So I'd like to, at this point, I just see one other hand of Mr. Irwin. This would be your second bites. Mr. Irwin, if you could ask your question or make your case, and then we'll go to a vote.
Hi, this is Gene Irwin. I just want to say that going back to Diane Agostino's point about the 22 acres, I believe the hospital itself's footprint is smaller than this memory clinic, but their lot is double the size. All the neighbors have said all along that the hospital, if they think this is such a great idea, in such a need, it should go on the hospital site, rezone that, not this single-family residential zoning that exists now. And secondly, I forgot my point, so I'll just leave it there. But as I say, we're not against the memory clinic. If the hospital wants to rezone their property, which is 22 acres, more than double the size, put a memory clinic there, we're all in favor. But we've all sat through meetings going back before Memorial Day. It wrecked all the neighbors 4th of July. It wrecked all the neighbors Labor Day. We've been on this treadmill for months. None of the neighbors support it. And in addition, most all the supporters I've heard tonight, planning board, former hospital members, none of these people have ever been on the site walks. I've been to all the site walks. And Mr. Chicello, Mr. Brady, on and on. None of these people have ever walked the property. They're looking at a piece of paper that doesn't reflect reality. Thank you very much.
Mr. Irwin, I'm not sure you know whether they've been walking the property at some point in their lives or not. So if we could avoid that type of comment, that'd be appreciated. Okay, thank you, Mr. Irwin. I see Mr. Brady and Mr. Cocello. This is also your second opportunity. So Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Brady, town meeting member, precinct 9, and Mr. Chicello may be addressing this after I get off. But the hospital doesn't run memory care units, and we would, to the best of my knowledge, not be able to put a memory care unit on the hospital proper. So that's just a response to a comment made by Mr. Irwin, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Then Mr. Cocello.
Thank you. Just briefly, a couple points. On the traffic counts and comparables that were given, I would note that the reference was made to talking to somebody who worked at a nursing home. This is an assisted living. It's in a memory care facility. The staffing at such facilities is substantially different than that at a nursing home. So that's one of the reasons that the traffic counts are substantially lower. And then just very briefly, to the point raised by Mr. Irwin, the square footage at the hospital is something in the order of 250,000 square feet. So 5 times what we're talking about here. So I'll leave it at that. I would request that the body support this zoning amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this point, I see no other hands raised that for folks that have spoken once or twice. So I'm going to go to a vote, but one moment. Ms. Megan Russell, I think. It looks like you're signed in both with your phone and with your computer. We need you to drop one of those, or we'll drop one. So which would you rather be on?
Sure, I'll drop one. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And Ms. Agostino, you have a point of order?
Mr. Moderator, Diane DiTullio Agostino, Precinct 9. I do have a point of order. And the point of order being that we are talking specifically about the law, and I provided Mass General Law 19D that does oversee assisted living residences, and the chair of the planning board has now informed us that they changed the language. So this is a point of order because we're voting on a language that does not exist in Mass General Law that's quickly accessible under Mass General Law, Chapter 19D, and the regulations that support Mass General Law, Chapter 19D is 651 CMR 12.00. The point of order being, if we pass this with the language that the planning board chair just explained is not as a certified assisted living residence under which a memory care unit would legally come, then we've basically wasted the entire evening, and the residents opposed to this will easily be able to have it denied. That's my point of order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So for the body, a point of order, in my interpretation, is a question about the process by which the moderator is running the meeting or by which speakers are addressing one another. It is not necessarily a disagreement with the content of the article. So my advice for the members is that if you have a problem with the content of the article, then either amend it or reject it. But the points of order are about limiting time, following proper voting procedure, that kind of thing. So with that, I see no other hands raised, and I'm going to go to a vote. I just wanted to make sure, so we've heard from the planning board, we've heard from the select board, we heard from the warrant committee earlier. The language before you right now will require a 2/3 vote. What you see up on the screen is a language as it was amended by the friendly amendment at the beginning of this process. And so with that, are we ready to put up the poll? Okay, then we'll please put up the poll. Just a minute, folks, we've got to get everyone who are in one pool over to another pool. Yep, I see. Are we ready to put up the poll? Okay, now, all those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. And if we could unmute the phones, and I'll call for that vote. Okay, on the phones, all in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And those opposed on the phone?
Aye.
So 2 ayes and 1 no. Thank you. We can mute the phones. We got the votes in. Okay, we can put up the results. So the article carries with 73% yes, 27% no, and even including the votes on the phone, that is sufficient for the article to pass. Now I have, normally would go on to Article 2, but it is what, 10:20. I did receive a question in the chat about potentially knocking some of the smaller articles off tonight. So I'm going to recognize Mr. Fundling. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you. Jay Fundling, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I would like to move that consideration of Article 2 be postponed until after Article 3 and 4 have been disposed of. This is, I believe, postponing to a time certain, according to town meeting time, even though it's not a time certain, it's after these other articles.
So to be clear, you're asking to postpone Article 2 until we've completed Articles 3 and 4.
That is what I'm asking.
I see it. Thank you, Mr. Fundling. I see a second for Mr. Schroth. Very good. This this motion is not debatable. It requires, or amendable. It requires a 2/3 vote. So we will go put up the poll. I'm sorry, it doesn't require a 2/3 vote. I'm incorrect. It requires a majority vote. Good to go? Yes. People are still coming in, okay? Yes. Actually, just a moment before we put up the poll, just checking my records. This is a debatable motion to postpone to a time certain. And so if you would like to debate moving this to a time certain, in effect, I'd say we might be able to get 3 and 4 or 4 done tonight and pick up 2 on Thursday. Anyone wish to speak to that motion to postpone to a time certain? I see no one raising their hand. Okay, then we'll put up the poll. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. And if we could unmute the phones.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And opposed to, please say no. Okay, We can mute the phones. Put up the results, please. Motion passes 93% to 7%. So with that, we'll postpone Article 2 until Wednesday. So with this, I'd like to proceed to Article 3. See if we can get one done in 10 minutes. Recommended that the town vote, pardon me, I've got a question from the town clerk. Let me just take that for a second. Okay, pardon me. Recommended that the town vote to authorize the select board to petition the general court to enact legislation in substantially the following form, provided that the general court may reasonably vary the form and substance of the required legislation within the scope of the general public options, objectives of the petition. An act authorizing the town of Milton to issue a license for the sale of all alcoholic beverages to be drunk in the premises, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives and General Court assembled, and by the authority of the same as follows, notwithstanding sections 11, 15, and 17 of Chapter 138 of the general laws, or any other general special law to the contrary, the town of Milton may issue to 1 Elliott Street LLC or its successor in interest a license for the sale of all alcoholic beverages to be drunk in the premises of a restaurant located at 1 Elliott Street in said town, provided that any successor in interest shall be subject to approval by the Milton Select Board and the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission. Provided, however, that an application to transfer the license to a successor in interest shall be granted and approved according to the standard for a new license, and provided further that the procedure set forth in section 15 of chapter 138 shall be applicable thereto. The licensing authority shall not approve the transfer of the license to any of the locations. Said license shall be subject to all said chapter 138, except sections 11, 15, and 17. With that, I'd just like to recognize Ms. Conlon of the Select Board. Ma'am, would you like to explain this briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Katie Conlon from Precinct 3 and Chair of the Select Board. As many town meeting members know, in the past, whenever we've wanted to have authorization to issue a liquor license, Milton needs to request authorization from the state legislature. And there is some lead time involved in that for the process to play itself out. We have a request from the owner of the property located at 1 Elliott Street. This is a parcel, one of the brick buildings from the former Baker Chocolate Factory, where there is a gym currently in the building. And Mr. Corcoran, representing the owner of that building, came in to meet with us and went over some plans that the owner of the property has for a brew pub at the location, and I believe a mixed-use development. So they're looking at an economic revitalization of that location, including the addition of a wooden building between two brick buildings that was at that site at one time and was removed many years or decades ago. The select board is seeking town meeting's authorization so that we can seek a home rule petition from the legislature, giving us the authority to issue a liquor license for 1 Elliott Street. And everyone should be aware that if we do get this authorization from the legislature, the owner of the property would need to come into a future select board meeting. We're talking probably several months, if not a year from now. There would be a public hearing at that time and an opportunity for members of the public and abutters to weigh in on the application. But all we're seeking tonight is authorization in order to have the ability to eventually issue a liquor license for this site. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, ma'am. I see one hand up. Ms. McCarthy, you're recognized. Pardon me, Mr. Kelleher, I see you there. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve Kelleher, Precinct 8. I have a question for legal counsel. Are we required through the legislation to use the word drunk? I'm curious if this word could be amended to consumed.
I will address that question to town council.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Kevin Freitag for the Office of Town Council. I would just offer the following, that this article is consistent with the previous articles that Milton has used to petition the legislature for this type of a license. And so while the difference between those words may be indistinguishable to me as I sit here, or to other town meeting members, I would suggest that we keep it as is, because that's what's been used in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Kelleher, did that answer your question?
It does, and I will agree with Mr. Freitag.
Okay. So I just saw in our chat that one of our members said they didn't get a poll on the last vote. Have we addressed that, Zoom team?
They are on the attendees. It might not popped up for them. I don't know.
So, sir, I apologize for the Zoom webinar. You're in the proper voting pool. We can see you here, and it seemed to be working for the large majority of our group. The vote either way actually was not recorded by person, and it wouldn't have, one vote wouldn't have affected the outcome. So we will see if we can get it to work this time. With that, I will call for the vote. This requires a majority vote. Do we have the vote poll ready to go up?
Oh, Michael, make sure it's should be just correct.
This is taking a moment, folks, because we have to move people between the presenters pool where they can't vote. And if they're town meeting members, we have to put them back in the attendee pool where most of you are, so you can vote. Okay, we can put up the poll. Virginia King says she has, I haven't put it up yet, Ms. King. Now, everyone should have it now. So all those in favor of the motion before the body, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. If we could unmute the phones. On the phones, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
Okay, 2 ayes, no. We can mute the phones. Okay, and we can close the poll and put up the results. The article passes with a majority of 94% in favor and 6% opposed. So ladies and gentlemen, it's now 10:30, even though it might be fast. My suggestion is we adjourn for the night and pick this up on Wednesday, when we'll be back here at 7:30 p.m. So if I could entertain in the chat a Q&A motion to adjourn until Wednesday. I see so moved by Mr. McLean. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Lessing. If we could put up the poll and unmute the phones. All in favor of the motion to adjourn please till Wednesday, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, please vote no. On the phones, all in favor, say aye, please. And opposed, no.
No.
Thank you. We can mute the phones. And put up the results. The motion to adjourn till Wednesday night carries 87% to 13%. Thank you very much, folks. A long night. Appreciate your coming prepared. If you have complex questions or amendments, please submit them in writing. With that, we'll see you 7:30 on Wednesday night. Thanks very much. And by the way, there's a question. This should be the same link. You should get a link, I think, 24 hours.
Tomorrow night, and then we'll go out an hour before.
You'll get one 24 hours at 7:30 tomorrow, and you'll get one at 6:30 on Wednesday. By the way, if any of you change email addresses, that's what causes the problem. You are registered by the email address. So please use the same email address to communicate with us through the rest of town meeting. Thanks very much.